What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the Fanatics Show. I am Michael, and today I am being joined by DH from the 5 Point Play podcast. Man, appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Oh, not a problem at all. It's a little bit early for a lot of people to talk about basketball, but you know what? Just about basketball time. We've got an outstanding exhibition game coming up here within the next couple of days, really, between Tennessee and Duke. And I absolutely cannot be any more excited for it. Duke is a blue blood in college basketball, and Tennessee is, I would consider a new blood when you consider, teams that have really been consistently in and out every single year competing. Even though they haven't competed for a national title, they've been up there at the top. What do you say about the upcoming game?
There's a lot of excitement. I think, when you think about this Duke roster coming off of, I think what a lot of folks would consider like a historic year. I think that a lot of Duke fans are excited to see what this version of guys that John Schneider's assembled this year, and what kind of expectations we should have coming off of that year. And there's a lot of excitement in Durham and a lot of around the fan base and a lot of excitement around this game. I'm very excited to see how Duke matches up, particularly with the physicality of Tennessee. I don't think there are many folks that have the taste in their mouths from a couple of years ago when you guys, whooped up on us in the round of 32. I think that's something a lot of fans still remember, and I'm sure that's something that John remembers. And so I don't think that this matchup is any coincidence. And I think that for a young team that's trying to get itself together, I think matching up against a Rick Barnes squad that's incredibly talented with NBA talent is something exactly that what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's something Tennessee needs to, and I got to give credit to Rick Barnes. Each of the past few years, he's had these type of matchups in the preseason. I mean, you look at 2 years ago when Dalton Connect was there, it was Michigan State in the offseason, a little charity exhibition game going on. Last year was a charity exhibition with Indiana, and then just bringing in another big name in Duke this year, and it's a matchup that I would honestly love to see more often in a meaningful game, either a regular season, a tournament in season, and not just every once in a while in the NCAA tournament like we saw a few years ago. And it's funny that you bring that one up because Tennessee just they honestly handled Duke in that game, and then
Agreed.
the next game, in a game that I felt like was much easier, Tennessee got embarrassed. So I mean, it's funny how things work in March, especially in
Yeah.
games like that. But tell us a little bit about Duke this year. Some returning players that you're excited about, some new players. Obviously, you got to fill the void of Cooper Flag from last year. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about Duke's roster this year.
Yeah. I mean, you to expect this team to try to replace a generational talent like Cooper Flag is just it's not very realistic. And I think that, as unrealistic as our fan base can be sometimes, I don't think any of us are really doing so. But I think we do have a really incredible talent by the name of Cam Boozer, who is one of the twin sons of one of our beloved Brotherhood members, Carlos Boozer, who is a
Mhm.
NBA All Star, and national championship champion in his own right. So I think the other night he kind of woke folks up to the level of talent that he has. He's not going to be the kind of guy that's going to be necessarily as flashy as a Cooper Flag was, or even this year a Darren Peterson or an AJ DeBonta, but he will be equally, if not more so productive. And I think that Duke is going to lean on him quite a bit to do a lot for us in a similar way to how Cooper Flag did a lot for that team.
Yeah.
I think that from a returning standpoint, I think that there's a lot of excitement around Isaiah Evans. Isaiah Evans, the 6'6", probably 185 now, still soaking wet. I mean, elite 3-point shooter. I think he was 42% last year, probably 45% on catch and shoots. And I think the difference in this year is that the expectation is that he'll expand his game. I think we saw a little bit of that in the second half against UCF, of the different things that he can do, rebounding, using him as a screener, in addition to his elite weapon, which is his shooting. So Caleb Foster, who is a junior 6'4", I think is probably what he actually is, even though he's listed at 6'5", who's in somewhat of a point guard battle with Caden Boozer, who is the other twin of Carlos Boozer, who's the freshman at Duke. Very different skill sets, and so a lot of Duke fans are excited to figure out which style wins out as far as the principal lion's share of the lead guard minutes. And then I think there's a lot of buzz within the team about Darren Harris, who is came in highly touted from Paul the Sixth in Virginia. Didn't get a lot of opportunities last year. I think Isaiah Evans beat him out for minutes, but I think there's a lot of excitement with how he's attacked the offseason, adjusted his body, gotten himself in playing shape, and is probably one of the better shooters on the team, if not the country. So there's a lot of excitement around Duke and this roster who I think has the versatility that John likes, and I think should have the talent to be able to make a deep run in March.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can just about expect every single year for Duke to have a good roster and have a team that can go deep into a tournament. They're going to compete for the ACC year in and year out. And the Boozer twins, those were two that I believe Rick Barnes was going after as well for a while, and never really seemed like it gained much traction. They were really committed to Duke the entire time. So two fantastic players, and to have a Hall of Famer like Carlos as their dad as well. It's following right in his footsteps. So
Sure.
really excited to see what Duke can do this year. So
And if I would, I will say that from an internal recruiting perspective, I don't, as much as I think it was a foregone conclusion that the Booster Twins will come to Duke, I don't think that's the case at all. If I'm being honest, like sure, it was an appealing concept, but I think with the way they handled their recruitment in total, they really wanted to force their own path and like determine what school would be best for them. I think Miami had a very real shot, and I think that Duke just ended up winning out with not only the playing opportunities and the winning opportunities, but also some of the I know the off the court NIL branding stuff that Duke does pretty well with. That I don't want to make the assumption or the assertion that the Blazers were automatic, because I think the reality is that they weren't, even if that's the perception.
yeah, yeah, I got you. So, kind of going over to the Tennessee side of things
Mhm.
here, I'm super excited about this team this year, but it is going to be a different look for Tennessee than it has been in the past. I mean, we did lose some very, very veteran players from last year, Zakai Ziegler and Jordan Gainey, both of them graduating out of eligibility. You also have Jemai Mashak is another one that's been there for a few years as well. A lot of experience that has graduated from this roster.
Chaz
You've also
Lanier.
yeah, Chaz Lanier, only here for 1 year, but he was a big part of that team last year. He's gone as well. But I think one thing we're going to see different from this year's team is you're going to have a pretty talented front court. And when you look at this front court here, no name really stands out as a guy that might be a, national player of the year or anything. But we've got three guys that I feel like can come in there and they can really bang down low. I feel like you've got some guys that have really worked on their craft as well. They've developed a little bit more of an outside shot, especially JP Estrella, who
Mhm.
unfortunately missed most of the season last year with a shoulder injury, but he's back and he is really expanding his game, playing a little bit more on the perimeter this year. And in the scrimmages, knocking down some 3-point shots that he wouldn't have in previous years. You also got Cade Phillips from Alabama who played most of the season last year. He's just an absolute bruiser. He's going to get in down low. He's going to go after every single rebound, and he's going to get his fair share of the points too. A lot of the points that he got last year was off of alley oops from whether it be Gainey, Lanier, or Ziegler going in there. And you've also got Felix Hawkpara, who is just a defensive masterclass most times that he's in the game, and he's really starting to develop his inside game as well, getting a little bit of a baby hook type thing. If he can get that down, then I feel very confident with him when it comes to the front court um, type style there. And then from there is really not a lot of experience coming back from last year's roster, other than you got sophomore guard Bishop Boswell, got
Mhm.
some time at the point guard position behind Ziegler, which was very, very good for him coming into this year, but still a lot of inexperience there. But one thing I do like is what Rick Mars did in the transfer portal. Brought in a transfer guard from Maryland, Jacoby Gillespie, and they're
Mhm.
saying that he is
He's a
absolutely
problem.
lighting it up.
He's a
He
problem.
lighting it up in the scrimmages so far this year. So
Hmm.
super excited to see what he can do in a Vol uniform. You've also got uh, transfer from Louisiana Tech, Amari Abram as well,
Hmm.
senior guard. You know, he's been a little bit everywhere. He's been at Ole Miss, been at Louisiana Tech. He's really improved each and every year that he has played college basketball. And then also picking up another front court guy who is a bruiser down low as well in Jalen Carey.
Hmm.
So fantastic transfer class in my opinion, and then a lot of young talent. And I'd be remiss to not name this guy first, Nate Ament.
Oh
He
yeah.
is the number one player, recently listed the number one player coming into this season's class, the freshman class. So, um, super excited. A lot of hype around him, and so far the reports from Knoxville is he's living up to that hype in the preseason practices. So, super excited to see what he can do this year. 6'10" freshman. Then a couple other freshmen that I'm super excited about. You got Amari Abrams, or sorry, Amari Evans
Hmm.
coming in as a true from Pennsylvania. You've also got Dwayne Brown, who is
Hmm.
the class 6A, I believe, or 7A Mr. Basketball in the state of Alabama. He's
Hmm.
a forward, 6'8" forward that he's been committed for a couple of years now. Really excited about him. And then last one is Troy Henderson, another freshman guard coming in. So you've got a lot of young talent there at guard coming into this season. And I
Hmm.
think you're going to see another deep rotation like you normally see with Rick Barnes' squad, playing about 9, 10, maybe even 11 deep coming into this year. So a lot of inexperienced talent, but a lot of really good talent coming into this year that, you know, Tennessee can make some noise early, and could this finally be the year that Rick Barnes' squad ends up making it to that Final Four that has eluded him for all these years? So,
I mean, I think, it's interesting. As I was doing a lot of scouting on the side, I scouted Bishop Boswell and Nate Ament at the John Wall out here in the Raleigh Durham area a couple of years ago, and Bishop really impressed me. And I know that he's had kind of some inconsistencies, like all freshmen do his
hmm
freshman year. But I would encourage Vol fans not to um, skip out on the opportunity to really expect something large from Bishop. And Nate I mean, he's incredible. I know we tried to recruit him for quite a while. And he ended up saying no to us and ended up going to where he felt that would best fit him. And of course, us Duke fans wish him the best, but we also hope that Cameron Boozer puts him in the rim, as we should.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and we're familiar with Jalen Carey as well because Vernon Carey's older brother was very large piece of our basketball team some years back. So a lot of familiar faces and family, and I think that it makes for an even more intriguing matchup because of those storylines, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of going into this matchup, obviously, you know, hasn't been a lot of public eye to see either of these teams in the practices and their inter squad scrimmages and things like that. But what do you expect out of this matchup against Tennessee on Sunday?
Ooh, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a battle of styles. I think that, and if styles make fights, I'm interested to see how Duke handles a lot of the experience and the physicality that Tennessee always brings to the table. I think that for a young team, especially defensively, I'm interested to see one what sets or actions that Rick Barnes decides that he wants to run in a exhibition like this. They're not going to open the entire playbook, nor should they, because nobody wants to give out their entire game film so early.
Exactly.
But I do expect, a lot of the off-ball screening, a lot of the floppy action, a lot of the down screen action that Rick Barnes is known for against more inexperienced players at Duke, where a lot of us who watched the UCF scrimmage, a couple of days ago, noted that early in that game, our communication needed to be a lot better. And so, in a game like this, when you're gonna get hung up on screens, those types of conversations and communications got to be essential for our Duke team. So I know that's something I'm watching for. I'm also watching for, and I know Duke likes to try to play fast. I mean, we
hmm
have some elite passers on this team. Cam Boozer can get you a rebound and throw you open in an outlet pass. Nick Kamenya, who is a freshman who I'm super high on. I wrote an article about him over the summertime. I think he is incredible. He's exactly what this team needs as a connector, as a hard nosed kid who's gonna, who's gonna draw fouls, he can shoot the basketball quite a bit and can play make at 6'8". I think Duke's positional size could be a bother for Tennessee. I'm interested to see how Tennessee adapts to that defensively. I think the physicality versus the length is going to be interesting to see what wins out. Um, and I think I'm interested to see, um, larger than that, I'm interested to see how Pat Gongba, who's our sophomore big man, 6'11", probably 260, comes in and bounces back after his game against UCF. He had a lot of great minutes late in the year last year, and I'm interested to see how our front court matches up with you all's depth at front court because we're not quite as deep. We have a couple of players who have been out with injuries, not just at the wing spot, but also in the front court as well.
Uh, But yeah, definitely, it's going to be an interesting matchup to see Tennessee's front court against Duke's front court because one weakness that Tennessee has had in previous years has been that front court. You've seen a lot of
Mhm.
talent there at guard position, at the wing position, but it really hasn't been all that deep of a front court for Tennessee. Even going back to last year, especially with J.P. Estrella being out most of the season, you had to
Mhm.
rely on Cade Phillips and Felix Okpara for most of the season, and really you didn't have much back behind them. Where this year you've got a deep front court and really an experienced front court as well because you're returning all three of those guys that I just mentioned. Plus, you bringing in transfer from Vanderbilt, Jalen Carey.
Mhm.
You've got some young talent in Dwayne Brown coming
Mhm.
in from Alabama. You've got some really talented forwards, and cannot forget Nate Amin. I know he's probably going to play a little bit more on the wing, but with his size, he can absolutely get down low and
Mhm.
take on some of those guys that'll probably be slightly undersized considering how athletic he is down low. So it's going to be really exciting to see kind of the matchup differences there, see the physicality and the experience versus the inexperience there between the two. And that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to in this matchup is seeing that how the inexperienced players, how these incoming freshmen really handle this type of game. Because even though it's going to be an exhibition game, it's going to
Mhm.
have a NCAA tournament type feel because of the position that these two teams have been in the past several years. And Duke historically has been a team that goes into a tournament very deep most years. So it's definitely going to have like a March Madness type feel to it, and it's going to be exciting to see how these young players handle it.
Absolutely. I think that this is, much has been made about John Shire's scheduling this year, including this, preseason exhibition game. And I think the reason that John wants to have this game is so that this team can grow pretty quickly. He's been pretty vocal about the fact that him having to balance talent and what he believes will fit best in this roster versus experience and what he had available to him in the transfer portal. And he chose young talent. And so what that
Mhm.
requires of him is to schedule Tennessee in Knoxville to see what these guys are made of, to see if these guys can hang. And I certainly think that Nate can play two through two through four, 2 through 5 really. I'm not sure from a strength perspective. I know he's put on quite a bit of weight. So
Yeah,
I think
I
that
feel like from a strength perspective, the five's just a little bit out there for him, but he can absolutely go down and bang with the fours if need be. And then because of his athletic ability, he can
mhm,
definitely go out and play the two position if need be. So yeah, it's
absolutely.
going to be interesting to see how Duke ends up matching him up with somebody on the floor there because he can definitely take advantage of several different matchups.
Absolutely. I think that you'll probably see a steady diet of it depends on if you'll go two bigs with Nate and have Nate at the three. I think it'll be interesting to see if Dame Sar plays for us. I think if he does play, he's been out a couple of, at least for a little bit with an oblique strain. But if he does play, I think you'll probably see a pretty steady diet of him just because of his length. They can match length for length. But Nate is still like a couple inches taller. And I can also see Nick Hamenia, who's 6'8", but he's been guarding Cam Boozer all off season. I think for matchups like these, and he'll be at a disadvantage, athletically and height wise, but Nick can compete defensively just because of sheer grit and will. He has the want to. And so I think the other matchup that I'm really excited about is to see how the combination of of Caden Boozer and Caleb Foster matches up with Jacoby Gillespie. I mean, Jacoby Gillespie is he's real. He's for real, and I think a lot of Duke fans should know that, and I certainly do as well. But I know that he also isn't necessarily the defender that Zakai Ziegler was. I think he has
Yeah.
defensive upside, but Zakai was just a lockdown defender, so that size difference didn't necessarily matter. At both guys being 6'4", 6'5", I'm interested to see defensively how Caleb and Caden decide to attack on both ends of the floor Jacoby and make him guard and see if he can do so. But I think that's going to be an advantage to Tennessee at the moment. But I'm interested to see the challenge that Duke steps up to on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a fun matchup all the way around. And, getting Jacoby Gillespie for us, he's originally from Tennessee, he's from Greenville, up around that Knoxville area. That was huge for us. And we were really, really hoping that he would have brought his former teammate as well from Maryland. I cannot off the top of my head remember his name, but I believe he went out to USC, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken, or someone like
Okay.
that. But yeah, I was really hoping we'd bring him in too. But 1 out of 2 is not bad, and honestly, I feel like we might have gotten the better of the two whenever it comes down to it. But um, just another thing I'm really excited to see. You mentioned the pace. Rick Barnes, he really does a great job, in my opinion, of playing the style that he knows his team can.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
last year it was definitely more of a we need to get it out type of deal, try to get it in transition, but make sure that we're taking good shots. Where the previous year with Dalton Connect on the team, you saw that some, but you were also able to see more. All right, let's slow it down on offense. Let's run the offense and try to run it through Dalton Connect.
Hmm.
And Chaz Lanier, he was a fantastic shooter, but he wasn't that guy that you could just give the ball to him one on one and say, "Here, go get me a bucket" type
Hmm.
deal.
Hmm.
Dalton Connect was absolutely that guy,
Yeah, he
and
was.
I feel like this season you might see a little bit more of up tempo, and I think
Okay.
you're going to have numerous guys that you're going to be able to play through. But one thing that I'm excited about, and I've mentioned it a couple different times, is the fact that you do have an experienced front court
Hmm.
that I feel like you can play through and get a lot of that inside out. You're going to see more opportunities from three and probably going to see a lot more made threes because you're able to play that inside out type deal,
Hmm.
which is something that Rick Barnes loves to play. You're probably going to see a lot more threes if you're a Tennessee fan than what you would like to see, but I feel like you're going to hit more than you
Hmm.
have in the past because you got that inside out type option. But one thing we do know, of course, is that Rick Barnes is going to have a physical team. They're going to have a defensive minded team. And I'm really excited to see the challenge against a team with the experience and with the athletic ability that Duke has.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that. I think that this team could be built for transition. If I think about the roster itself, I think when I think of Tennessee, I think of just they're going to grind you down on both ends of the floor. They're going to take you deep into the shot clock, pick you up 94 feet. By the time you cross half court, you're at 20 or 19, and you have to throw up a contested shot. And I'm interested to see defensively, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Michael, on this. From a defensive standpoint, I know that Rick Barnes has had consistent top seven, top five defenses every year. What do you think the defensive upside in a post Zakai Ziegler, Tennessee program? How do you think the defense will fare? Not just today, because this is October, but kind of as you know envision it out. Where do you think y'all can be by March?
So I do think by March we're going to see a much more disciplined type team. But I do think early on, especially, you're going to see Tennessee's defense take a step back from where Rick Barnes would like it to be and from where we've seen the last couple of years. Because you brought up Zakai Ziegler. I mean, dude was a fantastic defender. He was a pest. I mean, that's why he won SEC Defensive Player of the Year back-to-back seasons. He was in the running for National Defensive Player of the Year last year, and I believe the year before as well. But in my opinion, he wasn't even the best defender on the team. I felt like
Mm-hmm.
Jemai Mashak was
It's probably fair.
uh, because of his versatility, really, because he could guard literally 1 through 5. Now
Hmm.
he did have a height difference between um, but between that five position there and really the four position as well, because he was a 6'5" guard,
Hmm.
and you saw him 2 years ago when Dalton Connect was playing having to guard Zach Edey at times because our bigs
Yeah.
got into trouble. And once Zach Edey got positioned down low, it was mismatched. No,
Yeah.
it wasn't anybody going to stop him. But as long as he could keep him off the block, and that goes for any big defender or any big offensive player down there,
Hmm.
I give Jemai Mashack the advantage a lot of times just because of how good of a defender he was.
Hmm. Hmm.
But definitely losing those two guys, that's going to hurt. But Rick Barnes preaches defense. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
number one thing. So defense is still going to be fine, but I do think you're going to see more points given up this season. But I
Yeah.
think you got a lot more offensive talent where you're going to see more points scored as well for Tennessee. So I do think it's going to be a little bit of a more balanced out type deal. But by the time March comes around, I think we're going to see Tennessee's defense start to lock down a little bit more,
Yeah.
which really excites me.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think, expecting any team to look the way they want to look in October versus March is a fool's errand. But I do like to get your perspective because I mean I think that aside from the heartbreak of that round of 32 exit, which is what it is, I'm a fan of good basketball, and Rick Barnes has great teams every year, and so
Yeah.
I think Tennessee, especially coming off of a year where the SEC was so good and was so top heavy. I'm interested to see how you all navigate the conference and prepare yourselves for March. And I think y'all have the team to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel the same way with Duke as well. I mean, you did see the ACC kind of take a step back last year
Yeah.
overall as the conference goes, but you saw Duke right there at the top the entire year and really dominated. And that's what you really want to see from a team is when the conference takes a step back, but as long as you're still dominating and
Hmm.
not, playing down to your opponents, that's what you need to see. And that's what Duke did last year. And I feel like it's going to be more the same this year as far as Duke is going to dominate. I do think the ACC will be up from last year. I don't see them
I
being
agree.
as down as they were last year. But
Yeah. Yeah.
going into the season here, obviously we got the whole season ahead of us. But
Sure.
what are your expectations for Duke this year? And is it, you know, the expectations that you have most every year to compete for the national title?
I think, I think so. I think when you're dealing in a one, I think I don't have to tell you this, but I would caution fans. You know, listen, in a one game scenario, when I go home, anything can happen, which makes it one of the tougher, which is one of the most, if not the most difficult championship to win, is because of that much variability and
Mhm.
parity in the sport. I think that if I'm looking at it from a talent and roster perspective, I definitely think this is a team that could compete for a spot in the Final Four again this year. I think that it's going to have to be much more about committee. I think Duke has some questions that need answering, particularly at the point guard spot, or I'll say the lead guard, because am I'm of the mind that the traditional point guard is dead in all levels of the sport. Um,
Completely
and
agree with you.
and I think it's been overblown about. I think guard play is important, but having a traditional lead guard isn't quite as necessary as it once was. And so I think the lead guard spot, who can be the most productive in the right combination between Caleb Foster and Caden Boozer, is going to be a big question for me. And I personally think that Duke's highest ceiling is unlocked if Nick Kameni is good, because he's really good. He's that centerpiece that kind of that can make the team go, with the things that he can do on both ends of the floor. So I think that it has the talent to. I think it's going to take some bumps and bruises. I think that much like last year, I mean, if you flash back to December of 2024, a lot of conversation was had about how Duke may not be as good as we thought it was because the offense looked bad, and the last second shots of giving it to Cooper Flag and John Shire's X's and O's. I think that all those lessons have been learned. And I think that this schedule and how Duke navigates the schedule and what it takes into league play is going to tell me in particular a lot about how far Duke can or can't go.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point about the traditional point guards, I definitely agree with you. I think that's gone away. And we're not going to see that anymore. But one thing that I will say is that You still need somebody that can run an offense and that can
Hmm.
handle the basketball, because if you don't have that, then you are in trouble. And
Hmm.
that's why, elite guard play is definitely something that you need. But you're 100% right. You're not seeing these traditional point guards anymore that just go out there and they don't score points, they get the assist and all that stuff. You see more point guards that they can still do that,
Hmm.
but they are also going out there and they're scoring the basketball.
You have to be a
So
threat to score to
complete,
be effective at this level, man. Like, I mean, you have to
absolutely.
be. And I think
Yeah.
that is the skill set difference, at least on the Duke side, between the conversations about Caden Boozer versus Caleb Foster. Is Caleb Foster's much more wired to score, um, whereas Caden Boozer is much more wired to facilitate and stir the pot and get guys open and lead pass and get guys in position. And I think depending on how the rest of the roster shakes out, develops or doesn't develop, will tell me a lot about which guy kind of wins that spot and how much the other one plays. But I think John has a, I mean, he recruited 10 guys to play, and so I'm excited to see. My hope is that everybody can remain healthy. That's the first thing. I know we have I would say a person who can compete for National Player of the Year, Malik Brown, who transferred over to us last year from Syracuse, who an elite defender, gave Janai Broom fits when they came to Durham. Gives most people, he can guard 1 through 5 easily, and I think coming from our bench likely, all of those factors play a role. And I'm expecting that Duke should be there. I think if John's trajectories for how his teams operate bears out, where they're playing their best basketball in February going into March, I don't think there's a team in America that would want to see them on the side of the bracket.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I never want to see Duke in my bracket. That's for sure, because I know that means that the bracket more than likely goes through Duke. Um, as far as Tennessee's expectations for the year, it's hard to say that they should be better than they were last year, because I mean, obviously you had all the experience in the world with Zakai Ziegler, Jemai Mashack, um, you had Chaz Lanier and all that stuff. So that was a team that seemed destined to finally make it to Tennessee's first ever Final Four, and you ran into a juggernaut in Houston, a team that's Tennessee just did not match up well against, and gave
Hmm.
Florida fits in the national title game. Um, but honestly, even with all that experience gone, the talent that is brought in this year,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
feel super excited about. I do think we're going to see some really inexperienced mistakes towards the beginning of the year that are going to get some Tennessee fans down. But I think by the time you get to March, the guys are going to finally be molded together. And I really, really hope, each and every year you want to be getting hot by the time March rolls around.
Hmm.
And I really think that we're going to see that this year from Tennessee. I'm not going to predict Tennessee to make the program's first Final Four, because I can't right now.
Hmm.
Sitting here today, with all that we see, with the inexperience and all that good stuff. But I do think you're going to see another Sweet 16, Elite Eight type year, which seems to be about what Rick Barnes does year in and year out. And what more can you ask for, really,
Hmm.
out of a basketball coach when you're consistently getting to that point? Obviously, you do eventually want to get over that hump,
Hmm.
but I think that he can in the next few years if he keeps recruiting the way that he is, getting people out of the transfer portal. And you've got a lot of talent that's going to end up coming back next year as long as nobody
Hmm.
leaves.
Right.
And I think that's about what he's playing for. This year is just, obviously you want to make the tournament, you want to at least make it to the second weekend. But next year is where you're really going to see Tennessee's expectations skyrocket.
Okay.
But I do think you got to be in the top five of the SEC, and
Hmm.
I think that Tennessee will be this year. And you got to make it to the second weekend, and that's my expectations right now for Tennessee. Obviously, I would love to say, hey, Tennessee's going to compete for a national title,
Yeah.
but they haven't so far, and I just don't think that they will this year. But they're going to definitely compete with each and every team that they step foot against, whether it's in Thompson Bowling Arena, or whether it's Durham, North Carolina,
Hmm.
or if it's Nashville, Tennessee, anywhere like that. They're going to compete, and that's what
Hmm.
I'm excited for this year.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of teams that I would look at and be like, okay, the competitiveness of the teams can ebb and flow. But I think that from a culture standpoint, Rick Barnes has done a great job of making sure his guys show up. They come to work every day.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, that gives you a shot in March. So when it comes to March, one thing that we know as Duke fans over the past several years, one thing that I think John has also learned from our side has been, I think this was uh, the year with Kyle Filipowski and those guys. I think that that team really made him shift and adjust his mentality when it came to how to foster a culture of competitiveness. Because John is one of the most competitive guys you'll ever meet.
Right.
Quiet, nice guy, but will take your head off if he could,
Hmm.
especially in the confines of a basketball game. And I think his team this year, last year had that. I think this team will as well. So I think that Tennessee is probably a few folks sleeper picks for a Final Four. I think the talent's there. I think that I would love to see how your front court comes together. I want to see what happens with your second guard position. But I think that if all those things comes together and your defense is up to par, up to Rick Barnes par. I
Yeah.
can't see any reason why a second weekend is not on the floor for you guys.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree with you. So appreciate you coming on with me tonight. Talk a little bit about this upcoming matchup. I'm a basketball guy. Where Skylar, my partner, he is more of a football guy for sure. I'm not even allowed to talk about basketball during football season on our live shows. So I'm
Gotcha.
glad that I get to do something like this so I can talk about basketball. But before we get off here, would you tell the folks where they can find your podcast?
Absolutely. I'm here on behalf of the 5 Point Play podcast. Shout out to the guys there. You can find it everywhere that you Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole nine. And also you can follow me on social media at DH the Composer. It's going to be an exciting season, and I'm excited to, if there's any conversations that the Vols fans have, take it easy on us if we win, and I can't guarantee the same if you lose.
That's fair enough. And then, of course, you can find 5 Point Play podcast, and you can find the Vol Fanatics Show on a College Huddle, where you can find 85 plus other podcasts that are just like us. We're just fans. We don't have any affiliation with the school itself. We're just big fans of our respective schools, and we love to talk about it. So, once again, appreciate you coming on tonight, DH, and good luck this Sunday. Good luck on the season this year.
Likewise, Michael. Thanks for having me, man.